Good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of the Prague European Summit, and thank you for starting your day bright and early with this early bird session on the post-pandemic prospects for the European Union's Eastern Partnership Initiative. My name is Daisy Sindelar, and I'm the Vice President and Editor-in-Chief at Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, which is headquartered here in the Czech Republic, and which reports the news in 27 languages to 23 countries which have no free press of their own, or where a free press is not fully established. RFERL's target area stretches from Bosnia-Herzegovina to Russia's Far East, but for the purposes of today's conversation, it's important to note that we also broadcast to all 6 of the Eastern Partnership countries: Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine. So, as most of you know, I'm sure, the Eastern Partnership Initiative was formally launched here in Prague in 2009 with the aim of boosting political and economic ties with former Soviet states on the EU's eastern flank, and that partnership is now 11 years old, and it has seen mixed progress. So we've seen 3 of the Eastern Partnership states, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine, make significant strides in embracing democratic and economic reforms, being rewarded in turn with closer ties to the EU in the form of trade and visa liberalization. With the remaining 3, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Belarus, there's been somewhat less in the way of progress. So over the past year, we've witnessed an unrelenting crackdown on civil society in Belarus following presidential elections last August. We've also seen a short, very brutal war between 2 member states over Nagorno-Karabakh, as well as military maneuvers by Russia along Ukraine's eastern flank. And all of this, of course, has transpired against the backdrop of the COVID pandemic, which is a period of time that has not only delivered a disproportionate economic blow to very vulnerable economies, but has also allowed regional autocracy to flourish, particularly in Moscow. The pandemic has paralyzed the movement of people across borders, and it's not an overestimation to say that it has really altered the notion of what a neighborhood is and what it means. So, the theme of this year's summit is Europe Reborn. The European Commission is responding this month with a 2.3 billion euro economic and investment plan for the Eastern Partnership, part of its plan for focusing on recovery, resilience, reform over the next 4 years. So these all sound constructive and proactive, but I think questions do remain on what policy response options the EU still has available in terms of crisis management if the situation in the Eastern Neighbourhood grows even more complex than it is today. So joining me this morning to discuss this important inflection point for the Eastern Partnership are 5 distinguished guests who bring a broad range of policy, diplomatic, and regional expertise to this conversation, as well as a thorough understanding of the relationship between the European Union and Russia. I am prompted by time constraints to be relatively brief with the introductions, but I do urge audience members who are interested to visit the Prague Summit website for full professional profiles. I'll begin by introducing those panelists who are joining us remotely. Professor Katarzyna Pisarska is the co-founder and co-chair of the Warsaw Security Forum, which is organized by the Casimir Pulaski Foundation and is dedicated to transatlantic cooperation and security issues. She currently serves as board chair at the European Academy of Diplomacy and holds academic positions at the Warsaw School of Economics, the University of Southern California, and the Azerbaijan Diplomatic Academy. Ambassador Tedor Japaridze has had a career spanning nearly 3 decades in his native Georgia. He served as national security advisor to Edward Shevardnadze. He was Georgia's first foreign minister following the 2004 Rose Revolution, and he went on to serve as a member of parliament. He was a Woodrow Wilson Public Policy Scholar in Washington and now serves as vice chair of ADC, which is the consortium developing the Georgian deep sea port of Anaklia. The 3 remaining panelists are joining me here at the Chernin Palace of the Czech Foreign Ministry. And I should say it's very nice to see actual human beings in the flesh. It's still a very novel experience. So sitting in the middle, I would like to introduce Yoda Kurfurst, who is a career diplomat with the Czech Foreign Ministry with a focus on transatlantic security and European and Russian foreign policy. He's held diplomatic posts in the big three capitals, Moscow, Washington, and Brussels, including serving as Czech ambassador to Belgium from 2014 to 2019, and he currently serves as the Czech Foreign Ministry's special envoy for the Eastern Partnership. To his left, Andrzej Williamson serves at the Latvian Foreign Ministry, where he heads up the department dealing with bilateral relations with the Eastern Partnership countries, as well as with Russia and Central Asia. Interesting job. In the early 2000s, he was part of the Latvian delegation for accession negotiations with NATO. He went on to direct defense policy and planning at the Latvian Defense Ministry and has served as Latvia's permanent representative to the EU's Political and Security Committee. And last, but certainly not least, Rostislav Hotin. I'm sorry, I got the orders mixed up. Andrzej is sitting closest to me. Furthest from me is the person to whom I am probably closest in this group because he is my colleague at Radio Free Europe, and this is Rostislav Hotin, who serves as a senior editor in our Ukrainian service. Prior to joining RFERL, Rostislav worked with both Reuters and the BBC World Service and has reported extensively on the post-independence trajectories of the former Soviet republics, as well as NATO and Russian-Ukrainian relations. So panelists, welcome. There's a lot to discuss. It's a very tight time frame. Today's discussion is scheduled for just an hour, wrapping up at 9:15, and we'll look to hold the last 15 minutes for Q&A. As Jan noted, most of the audience is probably joining us today online, in addition to our guests here at Chernin Palace. So, for those of you who are joining us through the European Summit microsite, just a reminder that if you're interested in asking a question, do go to the Slido site at sli.do, enter the event code, #PES2021, and you're able to ask a question or vote for a question that you like, which will take it higher up in the ranking. So, the past 36 hours alone have been a whirlwind of news developments in Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine. I'm still going to start the conversation by asking about a different country, which is Belarus, which last month announced it was suspending its participation in the Eastern Partnership. And this was in response to economic sanctions that were handed down as a result of the forced grounding of the Ryanair passenger jet in Minsk and the detention of the opposition activist Roman Protasevich. So this has been a year where we've seen a dramatic escalation of aggression by Alexander Lukashenko following the elections last August. Perhaps stepping out of the Eastern Partnership was an inevitable gesture on the part of the government in Minsk. So the Czech government has been deeply involved in supporting Belarus civil society during this past year. So I think the very first question, and perhaps it's an overly simple one, will have to go to Yaroslav Kurfurst. How many members are currently in the Eastern Partnership in your estimation? Is it 6 or is it 5?
Good morning, and thank you for that question. It's a good one because still this suspension of the membership in the Eastern Partnership by Belarus is being discussed. What does it mean by member states? So I will offer you the Czech answer, obviously, and we have to start to think what the Eastern Partnership is. What does it mean? This is the EU policy towards the neighbours. And here in that policy, the neighbours are six of them. One of them, Belarus, suspended the membership on the government's level. But there are many other stakeholders which are part of the Eastern Partnership. There is, of course, civil society, they are journalists, they are SMEs and many others. Personally, I believe we cannot abandon these partners who are so deeply involved in the Eastern Partnership. So I believe the Eastern Partnership does have the 6 members, including Belarus. But on the government's level, I expect that the chair of the Republic of Belarus will be empty at the meetings of the government officials. but there are many other partners we will work with. This is my take. 6 members.
Okay, that's good to hear. We have seen an escalation even in the past day with Borrell saying that more sanctions may be coming for Belarus if they don't stop smuggling migrants, as Lithuania has alleged, across the border from Belarus into Lithuania. Can you tell us a little bit more about what? It's understood that the chair may be empty, but the relationship continues through partners, journalists, SMEs, et cetera. How exactly does that work without a formal government interlocutor?
Well, of course, there are many programs with Belarus. Some of them are directed on the intergovernmental cooperation. In many aspects. Now we see the transformation of the Eastern Partnership, so there will be plenty of, let's say, digital transformation projects. There will be plenty of projects in the, let's say, green transformation, economy, of course, the governance, etc. For example, for the governance, it's hardly to expect that someone from Belarusian government will participate at the seminars on the efficient governance, etc. But I think that all the other programs where the government officials are expected to participate just will not happen with Belarus participation, including the summit. Because, as you know, on the 16th of December, the summit, the highest level meeting of the Eastern Partnership is being planned for Brussels. And then it's quite obvious that Belarus will not participate and the chair of Belarus will be empty. But there are many other programs, as I said, for example, civil society organizations, which are very active. They are regrouped independently or in the civil society forum of the Eastern Partnership. And I would like to see that these activities will continue. There will be the support by the European Union to these organizations. It will be harder with all the new legislation and measures of the Belarusian government taken against the civil society. But as I said, the EU just cannot afford to abandon all these partners who are fighting for democracy and better future of Belarus, including, of course, independent journalists we are supporting. So I think that's the mode of operandum for the future, I hope.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and thank you for your support of independent journalists. It's certainly important at a moment like this. The fact that Belarus will have an empty chair at any upcoming summit is certainly something that Moscow is likely to make hay with. Moscow has become quite adept at conducting its own affairs through parallel institutions and partnerships, whether it's the Eurasian Economic Union, MH17 crash investigators, or diplomatic and special relations with occupied territories. Just overnight, we saw the publication of an article by Vladimir Putin that I'm sure is on Rostislav's mind on the historical unity of the Russian and Ukrainian people, which basically accuses the West of contributing to Russia acting, to Ukraine rather, acting as an anti-Russia. So I wanted to ask a question of Andrzej Williamson. You're tasked with helping to manage Latvia's bilateral relations, not only with the individual Eastern Partnership states, but also with Russia. So that would seem to be a fairly delicate task. Latvia has a very large ethnic Russian population. At the same time, Latvia was among the first to oppose Angela Merkel's suggestion that talks should be reopened between the bloc and Vladimir Putin. So you have a nuanced vantage point. From that vantage point, would you say that the aims of the Eastern Partnership are inevitably putting member states on a collision course with Moscow, or is there some compromise to be found?
Good morning, and thank you for the question. I would say that my basic premise would be that it's not the Eastern Partnership policy as such that puts these countries at odds with Moscow. I think these tendencies are going a little bit longer back in the history. If you would look back, then before Eastern Partnership, we already had Transnistria and Russian presence in this region. We had Georgia 2008. So it's in my view, there are in this post-Soviet space there are two tendencies that are going in different directions. One tendency is from the side of Russia, this post-colonial vision of this space where nothing can happen without consent or some kind of control from Moscow. And there is other tendency stemming from these countries, which is a positive nationalistic approach, countries wishing to make sovereign choices and to move away from Moscow's control. So I would say there is maybe 50-50 chance that we can somehow manage these two tendencies. In case of those three countries that do not wish to join EU, I think there is a chance that some compromises can be found between these countries and Russia. In case of these other three countries, what we call trio, I don't see any chances of them and Russia finding any compromises because Russia wants to sell a different vision of the development. And you referred to yesterday's Putin's article. I think the crucial sentence there is when he speaks at the end of the article about Ukraine, he says that a sovereign Ukraine can only be in partnership with Russia. So I think this sentence expresses very well the Russian approach to these countries, and I don't think we can expect that there will be, I don't know, these two tendencies can merge.
Okay.
And therefore, I think EU has to do what it has to do and support these countries' free choice of making their free choices regarding their sovereign decisions regarding their future alignments and future friends.
Thank you. So as a reminder, the post-2020 policy for the Eastern Partnership sets 10 targets for 2025 that include investment and reform initiatives that are deemed to have the highest transformational impact for citizens and businesses alike. So this includes financing for small and medium businesses, investment in environmental and climate safeguards, support for digital transitions, and enhanced transport connectivity. So here I would like to turn to Tedo Japaridze, whose work with the Anaklia deep sea port is very much in the spirit of transport connectivity, as it's geographically positioned to serve as a major hub on the New Silk Road. It's positioned between China and Central Asia on the one side, the Middle East and Europe on the other. So Borrell, in his announcement this month about the 2025 targets, pledged 100 million euros in investment to facilitate transport connectivity on the Black Sea and strengthen Georgia's role as a bridge between Europe and Asia. So this would seem to be one of those issues where there will be no compromise to be found when it comes to Russia, which does not want to see Georgia gain greater economic and political independence or become a sphere of influence that offsets the rising influence of Russia and China in this region. So Georgia is one of the Eastern Partnership's success stories. It's experiencing a little bit of a setback right now, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But it has profited in ways that are tangible and rewarding to ordinary citizens, like visa-free travel. At the same time, we're seeing that this situation leaves Georgia at the center of a situation in which it's quite vulnerable to hostile interference from Moscow. So a question for Ambassador Japaridze, what is your view of the Eastern Partnership priorities as they apply to Georgia, and does European integration remain a compelling prospect for Georgians despite the potential for hostilities from Moscow?
Thank you. And my greetings to the panelists. And I need to say that it's very important, event organized by the Czech government, and it's very symbolic for me, for a Georgian, that it is moderated by you, Daisy, who represents, the very important institution, Radio Free Europe, which played incredibly important role in the developments when the Soviet Union was still alive, and playing still, making, countries like Georgia more democratic and more capable, and which is, in the format of, by the way, the Eastern partners. And you mentioned it's very important, of course, to strengthen Georgia's, civil society. And I need to say that, especially today, when Georgian civil society reacted in a very strong, resolute way over the death of young journalist, young cameraman, who was attacked by the mob, a radical mob, and he passed away. And I think, I'd like to pay my tribute to this very sad story. But again, this is kind of, a point which indicates that Eastern Partnership reached, very visible results, and especially in the area of the civil society, but not only there. Georgia, of course, is a different country in the area of economy, management, judiciary. But are we, perfect? Of course, Georgia is not perfect. There is still a lot of work to accomplish. But who is perfect in this kind of world? But what makes me optimistic is that Georgia, because of this Eastern Partnership program, we are maybe awkwardly, maybe clumsily, maybe a bit too vibrant, but we still moving ahead steadily and consistently, and that makes me very optimistic. And that's what Eastern Partnership was about. That it's not only achievements in this area, as I mentioned, economy and so forth, but also to make Georgia a different country identity-wise. And my colleagues, mentioned our relations with Russia. We understand that we cannot, change our geography, and we need, normalcy with Russia. And in this regard, my point, which I use, many times, is that, of course, we need to live with Russia. That's obvious. It's our geography, but we would never live in Russia. And I think, the Eastern Partnership programs helped us to understand it more precisely and resolutely. So, and living having normal relations, with Russia, Georgia would never concede its sovereignty, independence, and Western trajectory, including a Western Partnership. So I think that would be my answer to begin with.
Okay, thank you very much. And as the ambassador alluded to, those of you who are following news in Georgia do know that over the past couple of days we have seen large protests in the country as the result of a death of a journalist, presumably from injuries sustained during an attack by far-right activists who were trying to block the conduct of Pride events in Tbilisi and the journalists who were covering those events. So one of the distressing social trends that we've witnessed, even in the partnership's most stable members, is a lack of progress, and in some cases even a regression when it comes to the issue of inclusivity and rights related to gender identity and sexual orientation. And of course, so we have Georgia as the most recent case in point, but we're even seeing some of these same trends evident within the EU itself. I'm thinking of Hungary's new law banning LGBT content in schools, and Poland barring members of the LGBT community from adopting children. So, Professor Pisarska, I'd like to turn to you here. The Eastern Partnership includes among its priorities an investment in inclusive, gender equal, and diverse societies. But we stand at a moment in time when the global pandemic has laid waste to struggling economies. It has paralyzed free movement. Are values now a luxury in the Eastern Partnership conversation? And are trade and investment really now the true necessities?
Thank you very much, Daisy. It's a huge pleasure to be here, and greetings, of course, from Warsaw. I think first and foremost, we have to remember that the idea of the Eastern Partnership is really based about the idea of spreading democratic values, on democratization. When the initiative was formed in 2009 by the Polish and Swedish government, there were two underlying experiences or ideas behind it. On the one side, the Central European experience of actually bringing to this region, to Poland, to the Czech Republic, to Hungary, to the Baltic states, prosperity and security through democracy. Democracy that was understood not only as free elections, but democracy that is understood by the respect of rule of law, human rights, and democratic procedures. So these elements have been seen for the last 30 years as one of the recipe of success of Central Europe. And when the Eastern Partnership Initiative was formed, one of the ideas behind it, the main idea, was truly, yes, reforms are important. Yes, financial support for these countries is fundamental. Yes, trade, economic integration is what we want. But all this leads to having around us a ring of friends, of countries that share our democratic values. And so having said that, democracy and the question of values today, I don't think is less relevant to the project. I think it's even more relevant to the project, especially that throughout the transatlantic community, from Washington, D.C. to many capitals in Brussels, we today talk about democratic renewal. We have seen a number of years with a decline of democratic standards across the board in many countries, including my own. And there are large forces supported by external actors, which are also pushing us to weaken these democratic standards, knowing that at the end of the day, they constitute our strength. So as this discussion on democratic renewal begins among ourselves, among EU member states and in the United States and so on, I think it's even more important to remember what the Eastern Partnership has been standing from all along. And my last point is that I think that Ambassador who spoke before me said that you can't change your geography. Well, I agree. We are located where we are, but I think my country and many countries from this region shown that through democratization, in a way, you do change your geography. We have become part of the West understood again as a community of countries, a community of values, respecting human rights, rule of law, and democracy. And that change has also taken us away from the Russian influence because it's much more difficult for the Kremlin to control countries that are democratic, who have multiple power points, an independent judiciary, and a separate government, independent media, and so on and so forth. So again, when you ask me whether democracy and values are important for the Eastern Partnership, I think they are at the very heart of the entire initiative. And without that, we are just talking about some small development program with no claw.
Thank you. Good to hear this optimistic assessment. One of the things that's always very striking about the Eastern Partnership is that it is in no way a monolith. It really is an ad hoc union of states that may share a common historical legacy as former Soviet states, but from that point on are really very different in terms of natural wealth and resources, alliances, and political outlooks. So, as noted, the three states that are most avid in their pursuit of EU integration, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine, have been placed on a separate track for the past several years, sometimes to the irritation of the more recalcitrant members. And this spring, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine took an additional step of formalizing their cooperation as a so-called association trio, as a way of bolstering their case for European membership. So here I would like to turn to my RFERL colleague, Bratislav Hotin, who has covered Ukraine's integration path for years. And so, Bratislav, we're speaking at an interesting moment for the association trio. On the one hand, we have Moldova, which is really the good news of the past 36 hours, where we've just seen the pro-Western president, Maia Sandu, and her party win a very clear victory in parliamentary elections, which sets Moldova on a very positive westward path. On the other, we have Georgia with some of the events that we've just described. And then we have your country, Ukraine, where I'm sure many people today are discussing Putin's article, which describes Ukraine as an artificial construct. We also have Zelensky coming out of meetings with Angela Merkel yesterday, in which she continued to offer assurances that not all natural gas is going to be passing outside of Ukraine, that it will continue to receive transit fees. So Zelensky all along has said that the Eastern Partnership shouldn't set precise ambitions for each of its members, that they should be allowed some individual free will in determining their course. For some, a political dialogue is enough, and for others, like Ukraine, full EU membership is the goal. So, Bratislav, tell us about your take on the association trio. Is it something, in your view, that helps Ukraine? Does it hinder its progress? And what do you see as the potential time frame for Ukraine's further integration into the EU?
When the Eastern Partnership Initiative was unveiled in Prague in 2009, I clearly remember that the unhappiness, the unease in some Ukrainian diplomatic circles. Oh no, we are in the same boat with Azerbaijan, which has no pro-European ambitions. We are in the same boat with Belarus, run by the last European dictatorship. We are in the same boat with Armenia, which under Russian sway. But it was a wrong approach. Some people in Kyiv said that we should be regional leader. We should not just come to European Union with just ourselves, but we should bring others. We have regional ambitions, and especially when you have such countries, advanced countries like Georgia and Moldova. And Ukrainians are now very happy that finally the European Union, Brussels, they put in these kind of two semi-groups, three advanced countries, Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia, and other three which are slightly or strongly lagging behind. So for Ukraine, it was important to not to compete with Moldova and Georgia. These countries should cooperate, help each other, assist each other, support each other, worry about each other when there is a slight kind of reverse of progress in European integration. And I think that it was very important to form this association trio. My personal opinion is that these countries should join the EU together. It would be better for three of them and for the European Union. I can't imagine a situation when someone, I can imagine that if someone has a problem like Moldova or Georgia or Ukraine, then others will put pressure. Look, you should do better, let's go together, we have a common aim. Also, I remember clearly also when these countries at different dates signed the association agreements and free and comprehensive trade zones. And also I remember the jealousy in some countries when Moldova first joined the visa liberalization program, then followed by Georgia than for Ukraine. No, we don't need this kind of internal competition in this advanced trio. We need cooperation and mutual support. As for time frame, Ukraine wants to formally, as Zelensky said, formally to apply for EU membership, possibly 2023, maybe when Sweden will have a presidency in the European Union, maybe 24 at the end of first presidential term of Zelensky, who, by the way, didn't campaign on clear pro-European ticket. He comes from Russified East. He was kind of Russophone or Russian speaker. He didn't he wasn't involved into politics and foreign policy, but he made enormous progress in terms of vision that Ukraine's future lies within the European Union and Ukraine belongs to Europe. Second stage in terms of Ukrainian schedule of European integration will be possibly Lithuanian presidency in 2027. That's what Vilnius advises Ukraine. Then Ukraine should be kind of admitted as a candidate country with the rest of partners. Possibly, yes. And also there is a vision that in early 2030s, Ukraine should become, together with Georgia and Moldova, full-fledged EU members. That at least kind of vision, that light at the end of the tunnel, that a lighthouse to move. Even if it's not, it will be later, it's important to have this kind of schedule. It kind of mobilizes yourself, mobilizes your internal resources. And it's kind of a clear path and clear vision where we are moving to. Tactically, possibly Ukraine would like to get European perspective at the EU Eastern Partnership Summit in Brussels in December. That will be a tactical step. But strategically, Ukraine will aim for the EU membership in 10 plus years.
All right, so the dual mottos seem to be all for one and one for all when it comes to Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine, and also patience is a virtue. So let's actually turn back to Yaroslav Kurfurst. So what are your thoughts about the association trio? Does it dramatically escalate the path towards integration? And let's cast forward a little bit. We have the summit coming in December. We have the Czech presidency in the second half of 2022. What are the prospects for further progress with Eastern Partnership countries, particularly the association trio over the next year and a half?
Thank you for the question. I believe that the dichotomy between inclusivity and differentiation is one of the biggest challenges of the Eastern Partnership currently. But before focusing on the differentiation and the trio and the rest, I'd like to see what unites all the Eastern Partnership countries. Of course, all of them want to maintain the statehood. And in that very region, this is a big job and big task to highlight themselves as a sovereign countries because of the geopolitical pressures from Russia. The second, economic prosperity. The Eastern Partnership is really promoting economic prosperity, and all 6 countries want to be economically prosperous. That's very clear. Of course, there is a good effort to have good relationship with the European Union. This is also one of the common denominators of all 6 countries. Of course, now we don't see that approach from Minsk. That's a pity. But there is the common denominator of all these countries. And then you can speak about connectivity and digital transformation and economic projects, etc., etc. Now on differentiation, there are obviously 3 countries which felt that they want to formalize their unity in this European aspiration effort. But the other 3, we cannot just say this is another group. They are very different also. We have to approach Armenia, which is making a lot of effort to be close to the European Union. There is a SIPA agreement we have with Armenia, so we have to treat Armenia in a separate way. Azerbaijan making a lot of effort in developing the areas like connectivity, the energy cooperation, some areas of economic cooperation. So again, we have a really good agenda with Azerbaijan, though it's clear that nor Armenia nor Azerbaijan don't have the European aspirations. And of course, Belarus is a very different. So we cannot treat as the European Union 6 countries with the same pattern. We have a hostile leadership in Minsk. We have 2 governments which do not have the European aspirations, and we have other 3. So I believe that this is now the job of the European Union to strike the right balance, to make from differentiation really an important approach to that region and give the 3 with European aspirations a good agenda. They should not feel they should not feel the Eastern Partnership as a break to the European aspirations. That's very important. For the summit, I think that would be one of the messages, of course, we have to deliver as the European Union. We have to deliver another message that this region is strategically important for the European Union. If the EU wants to be a global player, it should be an important player in the neighborhood, obviously. And then there is really a lot of politics behind it. We have to deliver a very clear message that we stand united as the European Union, absolutely firmly behind the Ukrainian, Georgian, Moldovan and other countries' sovereignty and territorial integrity, that the annexation of Crimea is absolutely unacceptable, and of course the engagement of Russia in all these frozen conflicts is very unconstructive and unacceptable. So all these messages should be delivered, obviously. Of course, European perspective. We as Czechs, we would like to see a very strong language on European perspective. And then there will be the new working program beyond 2020 established or approved, and it's quite a nice and ambitious program which should maintain this value and rule of law democracy pillar, and of course then there is this economic pillar which should be also very, very strong, and it's proposed in a very nice way. So this is for the summit basically, and for the Czech presidency I will be very short. Of course we are in a very initial stage of preparing the Czech presidency. We were pushing very hard during the preparation of the new agenda for the Eastern Partnership beyond 2020, the issue of resilience. And we would like to accompany during our presidency the issue of resilience, which would be form maybe the first pillar or first priority of our presidency in the Eastern Partnership, the second economy, and the third environmental issues, but we would not neglect also other agendas. We would like to take the resilience to the very concrete, let's say, level of treatment. This is a very nice concept, but for many this is a buzzword. This is the very abstract term, and we would like to take this from the level of abstract term to the very concrete project-driven approach, which will be backed by money and concrete activities. So in this way we are planning a couple of nice events on resilience. One of them would be focusing on the municipal level, make municipalities more resilient. During the pandemics we saw how important it is. The other will be the media resilience we would like to focus on, and then there are plenty of activities planned in other areas, including the security dimension. By the way, we would like to highlight the security dimension, security resilience also towards the summit this year in December. So that's in brief all these questions you asked me for.
Okay, you have a busy year and a half ahead of you.
Yeah.
We are unfortunately down to our last 12 minutes, so I do want to make opportunities for questions. Unfortunately, I'm having an issue with my pad, so I cannot see questions that are being submitted electronically. Maybe someone can help me up here. If there are any questions in the audience with someone who wants to ask from a mic, maybe we could start with those.
Good morning. My name is Kobalik Likadze. I'm from Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. I want to ask a question to Mr. Tedo Japaridze. Gamorjuba Badno Tedo. I want to ask this question. You, as former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Georgia, who really inserted a lot of force to make Georgia and Euro-Atlantic future more strong and reinforced Georgian aspiration. But we just spoke and you underlined these dramatic events in Georgia, Tbilisi, when homophobic anti-establishment forces attacked journalists. Dozens of journalists, among them RFL Georgian service journalists, were beaten. One then passed away under not finally, clear circumstances, but anyway, it really hurted Georgia, and I think that response from the government of Georgia and mainly Interior Minister, this very, how to say, dysfunctional response against those homophobic anti-establishment forces, which we are provoked from Moscow, and it's clear, everybody knows about it. It was just not bad, but what is dramatic. How do you think, how these events can affect Georgian aspiration further when the Georgian government is very optimistic that 2024 they will ask European Union to be part of this union? Thank you very much.
Daisy, may I answer?
Absolutely.
Thank you very
Ambassador,
much.
please.
Thank you very much, Goba, my good friend. Nice to see you there. Of course, horrible thing happened. A person died. In this case, journalist, cameraman, and I personally, and not only I, and that makes me optimistic that democratic habits, democratic democracy in general is so much entrenched in the Georgian society that the reaction of Georgians was very proper in this over this very tragic incident. And what makes me also optimistic, this reaction from the Georgian society made Georgian government again to reaffirm that Georgian government is fully committed to Georgia's democratic trajectory, to the Western trajectory. And I hope it usually happens in our life that this tragic incident would strengthen Georgia's democracy, Georgian democratic habits, and Georgia would stay and keep be very strong against any homophobic expressions, and would be committed fully to democracy, freedom of expression, freedom of press, and I'd like to use this opportunity, Daisy, and to react to a comment made by my distinguished Polish colleague. Of course, when I said that we cannot change our geography, that's obvious fact. But on the other hand, what I had in mind, and I also followed up by saying that if Georgia becomes stronger internally, if Georgia becomes an institutionalized democracy based on the rule of law, it would make Georgia stronger, dealing with very, very dire geography, and whatever our big neighbor tries to impact on Georgia, it would be not easy to do that. That is my point. I think if Georgia becomes stronger, it would be Georgia's Article 5, I would say, it metaphorically, to make Georgia more democratic, and a country which is based on the rule of law. So again, we are moving. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm terribly sorry to interrupt you, but we have so many questions and very little time left. And I did want to make sure that we got to one question that was submitted on Slido, because it deals with two countries that we've probably talked about the least in today's very brief conversation, and that's Armenia and Azerbaijan. And so, Andrzej, I'd like to put this question to you. The question as submitted is, are there any instruments within the Eastern Partnership framework that the EU can use to improve relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan after the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh?
Oh, thank you. Not an easy question.
I gave you an easy one.
Yes. Well, maybe not necessarily within the Eastern Partnership. Obviously, there are these civil society forums that we can try, and the EU has tried in the past. Obviously, there are other instruments outside the Eastern Partnership that the EU can do, but that would be depending upon the will of both of these nations actually to put past behind, and I'm not sure if we are yet there. So EU as a mediator, okay, these ideas have been up in the past. But I guess without the foreign backers or foreign supporters of these countries, EU alone cannot really manage this situation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can we take one more question from the audience?
Hello, my name is Pavel Havlicek, if you can hear me. Yes, I'm a research fellow at the Association for International Affairs. A brief question. We have one of the trio countries missing on the panel, which is Moldova. I have a question in that regard to Yaroslav and Andrzej's. We have seen over the weekend that majority of the Moldovan society has clearly expressed their interest in promoting the European way of reforms and also closer integration with the European bloc. So question to you, a very direct one, what measures and concrete policy steps your governments, my government, can be imagining in the future short-term measures, that we might be boosting the capacity of the government and the Maia Sandu as a president to move on with some of the policy measures, reform agenda, and also the European agenda. Last time when Maia Sandu was in government, the window of opportunity was relatively short, and we know how it ended. This time I hope we have more time, but how we can be responding and how we can be supporting Moldova in this, after this very important revolution that has just happened. Thank you so much.
Yaroslav, why don't you start and then
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Pavel, for the question. It will be very much depending on the priorities of the new government. It will be formed. We all welcome the pro-European victory of pro-European forces, pro-democratic forces, anti-corruption forces. I expect that Maia Sandu will repeat again this this effort, extraordinary effort to reform the justice system in Moldova, but also to reform plenty of areas. And here, the Eastern Partnership offers, and the European Union offers a lot of assistance, a lot of capacity building. You know that Moldova is the country #1 as a target of our development assistance from the Czech side globally. So we have many tools. We have transformational resources for transformational projects. There are many interested and ministries and actors in the Czech government. One of the things which are completely new was the shadowing scheme, job shadowing scheme, which was discussed before the pandemic situation turned down on all the possibilities of exchanges, physical exchanges of government officials. So we are ready to invest into the, if Moldova is interested, of course, into the help of boosting capacities of the public administration. Public administration was always the brand we were promoting. We are now preparing one of the seminars in the efficient public administration for the fall and also for the presidency. This area will be one of the key issues. But, you know, this relationship between us and Moldova is quite really large and complex. There are really many activities going on. And I think the outcomes of the elections, this is just a wide open space for the activities we will definitely try to exploit. So, good news.
Andres.
One sentence only, I think. Priority should be post-COVID recovery, basically donating vaccines to get the economy rolling. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's good to end on a positive note. I think Moldova has really boosted our spirits over the past 36 hours. But I am afraid we're going to have to stop there. We've unfortunately run out of time. So I do want to thank all 5 panelists for a fascinating discussion. I'm sorry that we weren't able to get to more questions, but thank you very much to Katarzyna Pisarska, Tero Japaridze, Andres Williamson, Brstislav Hotin, and Jaroslav Kurfurst. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the day and the rest of the Prague European Summit. Jan, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you to Daisy, and again, thanks to our most distinguished guests.